everyone. Welcome to Shelf Space with Kino Lorber, where we talk about all things physical media with Kino Lorber's head of acquisitions, Frank Tarzi. Today, we have the ultimate special guest, Richard Lorber himself, CEO of Kino Lorber Media Group and the man who put Lorber in Kino Lorber. They will both be answering your audience questions, so thank you to everyone who submitted a question ahead of time. If you would like to submit a question for a future episode, be sure to sign up for our newsletter to get on our email list. If you have a customer service question, please submit them at the link in the video description below. Hello, Frank. Hello, Richard. How are you?
Hello. How you doing?
Hi. Good to be here.
Great to have you here. So
I can't think of any place else I'd rather be.
Oh, good. I hope it wasn't a long journey for you from your office. So we like to start out by asking all of our guests, how do you guys know each other? How did you two meet? How long have you been working together?
Well, I'll start. Frank predates me. Hard to say this without a smile, but I kind of inherited Frank when I acquired Kino back in 2009. And I think we kind of did a sniff test of each other and kind of had some question marks. And then Frank very soon thereafter quit.
True.
So that spoke, not highest mark for me in terms of his confidence in my ability to drive the ship. But over the next few years, I think I won back some of his tolerance, if not respect. And he came, knocking on the door, and I said, I love recidivists. You're welcome back with open arms. And, we gave him a wider berth. And I guess he realized that, there was more fun to be had working with us again.
Yeah, well, when the merger happened between Richard and Don Krim, I wasn't planning to leave at that point. I was hoping to do some studio deals and stuff like that. And I, spoke to Don about it, and Don was not interested. He was very much... he wanted to renew all the titles that ended up going to with Cohen, the old Dark House and all that whole library. And so I felt like I had been doing things over and over and over, the same kind of things over and over again. So I needed some change. I needed something to do something different. And so the opportunity came up where I could actually take the package of films that I was going to originally bring to Kino to another company. And of course, Richard, being the really great business person he was really surprised that Don had turned those down. And so we don't want to say what happened or where, but I ended up leaving for about 4 years. And then I was about to really leave the business because I came to the point where the things with me and all of the films were not working out, and some of the promises were not kept. And I was just sitting on my desk at my apartment, and I was like, hey, Kino's 3 blocks away. Let me go talk to Richard and see what happened. And then Richard and I talked, and Richard, of course, automatically thought I was coming back for the original director of sales job. I said, no, that's not what I want to do. I want to do acquisitions. I want to bring studio films. And then that's what happened. And we had a little talk. I don't know if you remember, but during the Christmas party, you did ask me, Frank, why did you leave? And I tried to explain to you that I was told things differently by Don. And Don, I think, was very protective of me. He was like a father figure and stuff like that. So he thought that he thought that you and I would not click, but it was the opposite, actually, because early on I started proving myself to you, and you were like, oh, okay. I think when I gave my notice to you, I had given it to Don earlier in the day, and he said, can you wait till Richard shows up before you talk to anybody else? I said, of course. So when I gave you the notice, you said, well, have you made up your mind? Because can we do something to make you stay? Like, give you a bump in pay or something like that. And Don was shocked when that happened. He was like, so we ended up going to lunch that day, and he was like, see, that says a lot about you, that in a few months, Richard completely had a change of heart about to you, because we hadn't really met. We had talked a few times, and I knew of you. I knew of course, Fox Lorber. I was a fan of that. And then Koch Lorber. Both labels were like doing some great stuff. So yeah, it was something that had to happen, and I think it was all for the best. So
Well, I was, very sort of set off balance by your departure, since I hadn't done anything
yeah,
yet. Don and I were friends before I acquired his ownership stake in the company. We went to college together. I had met him my freshman week at Columbia.
Oh, wow.
And we, this goes way back before anyone watching this was born, probably. And we stayed in touch over the years. And after college, we were on sort of quasi-parallel tracks. And I had started in 1981 a company called Fox Lorber and started getting involved in the direct distribution of the videos and television series and things in the late 80s and into the 90s. And Don and I did some deals over the next 15 or so years. We licensed some titles from our library to him for video. We acquired some titles that he had for us to handle in other markets, and we joint ventured together on some educational releases. And in that course, I had great admiration for what Don had done and the team he built. And I didn't really know Frank in those years, but when I moved into the company at the end of 2009, Don and I were dividing the responsibilities as co-presidents. I was the CEO, and I trusted his tastes and judgments implicitly, but I couldn't quite figure out what drove Frank away, and I didn't pursue it. But once, unfortunately, Don died 2 years later, and we still miss him to this day. He had advanced leukemia, and it was a great shock for a man such good, otherwise good health, and so young and spirited to be leaving us. But I was, ready to take over the reins 100%, and I did that. And I was aware of Frank's background. I revered Kim's video. I kind of grew up in the home video business starting in the late 70s. That was my first engagement in commercial media world after leaving teaching as a professor at NYU in fine arts and art history and related areas. So, the orientation I had toward film was very much in terms of what is now considered collectibles, the enduring films that were classics, that were the art house darlings, the films that people would want to watch and conceivably own. And I think my taste and sensibility really aligned with Frank's in many ways. And Frank had such a breadth of knowledge and depth of appreciation for films that were actually, many of them were unknown to me, but I used to haunt video stores in those years, in the early 80s and into the 90s. And so Frank's background in that area, in that field, was, just a great pleasure for me to know that there was a person who had such depth of knowledge and love for film and movies, and could actually help us find new ways of engaging with audiences beyond just the limited films that we were releasing, or Don and Frank had been releasing, that were mostly films that had been put out theatrically. Needless to say, when Frank said, I'd love to come back, and, I was happy to give him basically a carte blanche. I said, tell me what you want to do and run the show. And
Amazing.
He's doing it to this day. And he's reinvented the show.
Yeah, definitely.
well, the thing that makes Richard a great boss, somebody great to work for, is that once he trusts you and he understands that what you're capable of, he does give you carte blanche. He gives you the freedom to do what you want to do. Once in a while, he says, how about we pick up this movie too, or that one? But majority of the time, it's like I send him a list and say, these are the things I want to pick up, and he looks at them, has a few questions here and there. You think we're paying enough for this, or we're paying too much for this? But that's what I kind of wanted to run my own label in a lot of ways, and I was able to do that. And that's so the start of the Studio Classics, that was in 2014, and everything else that we've done since then has been pretty great. So
I love that.
Well, I'm kind of a dyed-in-the-wool entrepreneur. I've never succeeded working for anyone else, and I love to be in business with other people who have that entrepreneurial spirit and can, see the future and shape it to a vision.
Yeah.
And that's where we are today.
I think great leaders empower other people to kind of lead on their own as well. They don't just constantly hold their hands. So I feel like that's what you've been doing as a leader. And I would love to actually know more about how you two work together nowadays, in acquiring, restoring, distributing films. Do you have identical visions in terms of, what to acquire? Do you have differing views but are complementary? I think it's interesting, Richard, that you say you two have similar tastes in film, because a lot of the studio classics films I would not have guessed were up your alley, like the Happy Gilmores and the Bottoms, that we released. So I'd love to hear how you guys kind of work together on that front.
Well, let me just start by saying that we've acquired so many films that I wouldn't venture a guess of how many I could call my favorites, and many of them I was aware of, but they were not on my must-have list from growing up in the 60s with the Nouvelle Vague and adoration of Bergman and Truffaut and those international art house stars. But I had just learned a tremendous amount about more recent American cinema from what Frank has been able to identify in the libraries of the studios. And he actually knows more about what the studios have in their coffers than most of the executives at the studios. And I was always very impressed with how he would explain where the masters were and what rights they had and what rights they thought they had but didn't have. And so, my instinct has been to give Frank a wide berth, and I've come to appreciate films that were not on my radar or not in my taste sphere. That said, there have been films that I consider to be important, art house achievements that Frank will, I wouldn't say even grudgingly, but Frank is maybe lukewarm about, but I've encouraged him to pick them up. And there are other films that we acquire through our theatrical arms that aren't necessarily films that Frank is acquiring from the studios. But I would say generally the surprises have been mostly happy, very happy.
Yeah, when it comes to the international studios, Studio Canal and Gaumont and all them, those are the ones that Richard and I work the most on together, because there's stuff that Richard is very passionate about, and art house films and certain directors, Godard, Eric Romer, or whoever else. And then then at the same time, Studio Canal also has a lot of American titles that I grew up watching films. I love foreign films. I love art house. Saw Kurosawa's run in the theaters, and went to Fassbinder festivals. And but it comes to a point where you come to a certain age and you realize what is your favorite types of films. And for me, it's always been American genre films has been my favorite. So as you get older, you have less and less patience and less and less, just the knowledge that Kim's video helped a lot with this too, because it really expanded my horizons, where I went there and I was like, I knew so much, but then I learned so much more. So many directors I had never heard of that I discovered over there. And then it was like a perfect mix. And then when I remember when Don offered me the job to leave a buyer position and become the head of sales at Kino, I had a lot of confidence in what I could do. So I took a pay cut and came to Kino, because I realized if I come here, I felt like I was what was missing at the company. And I felt like if I would come in, I could get Don to do things that he had never done before. And I remember on the phone, he called me up and he said, you know, we really want to pick up this film called Happy Together, but they're forcing me to also pick up Fallen Angels. And I'm like, Don, you got to take that right now. I said, by the time we're all said and done, after 7 years, Fallen Angels would be the bigger title. It was so more. He's like, you think so? I was like, yeah. And I still remember when Nancy and Emily at Zeitgeist wanted a really good advance for the Brothers Quay collection. And I told Don, I said, he said, can you guarantee this many units? I said, I can guarantee twice as much. And he signed it right away. You know, the Buster Keaton box said something he didn't want to do because it was too big. He was like, who's going to buy this $200? But I still remember being in a hotel room during one of my business trips, and Roger Ebert picked it up and said, my DVD pick of the week is the Buster Keaton collection. So those are the things that happened, and it was during the DVD boom, right, you know, when this has happened. So we did a lot of really great stuff. We did a small studio deal at that time. We picked up some Universal titles. Man Who Laughs and a few other ones, and wanted to do more, but the person there changed, and then, you know, before you know it, everything that I had created, the list that I had created, ended up coming out from Universal themselves. So,
well, I think what's an interesting commonality between Frank and me was our grounding in the wild and wonderful world of early days of home video. I started my career in media after being in academia, working for a company in 1979 called the National Video Clearinghouse, which was the worst conceived business that you can imagine, but it was identifying all the titles that were available in the burgeoning new world of home video, meaning VHS. And I had the I guess, unenviable job of selling this video source book to video stores. And
very
if
dense.
you can imagine, in 1979, that there were, at that point, about 40,000 titles that had been identified by the editors who compiled this book that could be available on home video, but were not. And that was mostly the library of the non-theatrical divisions of most of the studios and a lot of the independents. And in these early days, you know, you had ads in the book from some very popular, you know, brand name companies like Photomat, who's long dead, and companies like Magnetic Video, who we all remember, or we all fail to remember warmly.
They were the first label to put out films, you know.
And Andre Blais was the founder, and he was probably the first mega millionaire by selling his business. And at that time, there were other startup companies like CBS Fox and others.
Key Video
and Vid America. And
that book itself is a collector's item now.
It is a collector's item.
I actually had a copy of that. Me and my brother would go through it, and then find out that a lot of the films are not out on video.
Well, the theory was that video stores would want to buy this book and have them available. And of course, video stores were opening on every corner. So there were, I don't know what time that I was marketing this, there were probably 10,000 or maybe 15,000 video stores. And all we had to do is sell one book to every video store. It would be a direct reference. It would be like the books in print of home video. That was the way it was marketed. It never occurred to the people who had hired me, and of course I was aware of this, that, well, why would a video store want to promote all of these titles that were not available in the store? And there was no direct order. It wasn't like this was a mail order opportunity where you can actually buy them. It was just, oh, look what's available.
But that also gave video stores ideas, because Video Shack started doing their own book. And,
well, one of my jobs was to sell to stores and chains like Video Shack, and the owner of Video Shack was a guy named Arthur Morowitz, who was one of my first call-ons. And I went into his store, and of course I was roundly being turned down by video stores on every corner. And Arthur said, that looks interesting, I'll take 100. And I fell off my chair. I couldn't believe that anyone would want 100 of these books. Arthur went on to have a brilliant career as a purveyor of pornography.
Oh, okay.
So what he saw in the value of this book, I still defeats me. But he liked me as a person, and he wanted to give me a little boost on my commission. So,
Well, that filled your quota.
but this buck continued in 3 or 4 years more in subsequent editions that were twice the thickness here, but they never really developed a business model. And 2 years later, I left the company and started Fox Lorber in 1981. But I was grounded in this, and it was a thrill to really be at the birthing of the home video industry. At this point, home video machines were in 2% of the population, as I recall.
Yeah.
And, it grew at a meteoric rate. And it was very exciting. It was another thing that was just showing some archival souvenirs here. Let me put that down.
No, I
for a
love it.
second.
We never usually have visual aids, so this is very
At the
exciting.
same time, we were at the birth of the DVD business, but it wasn't DVDs then. It was something that would become laserdiscs. And the main company that was promoting laserdisc was a joint venture between MCA and IBM. And it was called DiscoVision. DiscoVision was a disc that weighs about 3 pounds.
That is a work of art.
And it required a video machine that was part computer and part video disc player, which I had an early version of it for demonstration purposes. I was partnering with a company called VPI, Video Disc Products International, whatever they were called at the time. That was a job I was considering before I launched my own business, Fox Lorber. And they went to market basically offering these very handsomely mounted packages in media, but also in esoteric art subjects. This was a Martha Graham performance that they were offering for $6, if you can see the price on there, $5.99. And there were others like this, documentaries and cultural programs and selected movies. Needless to say, this did not become a mass market, but it did become the beginnings of what would eventually become the Laserdisc business, which was a very small subset of VHS. The big difference being that you couldn't record on a Laserdisc at this point. So,
Yeah.
But
It was for the sound and the picture quality, and
it was superb.
everything was released letterboxed, and
Yeah, it was really very
not everything.
impressive early days of collectability, and I was very proud to be part of that process. I'll give you an example of the early years that Frank remembers too from Kim's video. We were in the days of beta, VHS, and also the third format, which was VHD, that was a JVC-owned property. There were 3 different video disc players that were being marketed at that time. Actually, it wasn't VHS. It was RCA Select-Division, which was the capacitive disc. There was the Pioneer Laserdisc, and there was the VHD disc. This was after the beta VHS wars were over, and VHS had won the day. But in the early days, people were so confused about all the formats just between VHS and beta that people were so excited about actually having a video, having a movie that they could own and watch again, that they almost didn't care what format it was. My friend, a good friend at the time, was the head of video marketing for the NFL. And he was expanding his business to try to have films of college football games available on video, home video, mainly VHS videotape. And they did a survey to all of the colleges that had important football teams. Notably, they were promoting a Notre Dame championship game. And they had a box that said, well, do you want to buy this tape of the Notre Dame game? Check the box which says VHS or beta. And the majority of responses came back, yes, I want to buy it. What format do you have? And the answer was, don't know.
I mean,
people were just blindly buying this, even without knowing what format it was in and whether they could actually watch it.
there's a reason
that
there's a
was the-
band called VHS or Beta. That's how much of a debate it was. So-
Yeah, it was also. I mean, it was more of a rental thing at that time with VHS and Beta. The actual tapes were very, very expensive. It was made for the rental market, so I remember going into a video store and renting a film. I could not believe that you actually could see an uncut version of a film, but they bring it home and watch it, because those days, it was the beginning of HBO and everything else. So HBO was the first channel that we had. HBO. When we got HBO, we were so surprised that they were showing films without commercials and uncut, and those days we also had blank tapes, so we would regularly tape stuff. And but yeah, that the VHS Beta wars, I don't remember it too well because I was a little young, but I remember early on VHS was a format that when you went to the video stores in those days for rental, they actually had a Betamax section, and then within a year or so, you just didn't see Betamax in stores anymore. And the people that loved Betamax, they always said that the quality was better. So again, I'm not sure if it was, but it probably.
So,
Well, yeah. All right.
oh no, what were you gonna say?
Yeah, those were very stimulating days when we were all, agog with the whole idea of new technology and actually owning a movie. At first, a movie was just an experience, and now suddenly it was also a commodity. It was a collectible, whether you rented it or purchased it.
Yeah.
And there was also a very strange thing that when we started releasing films in my company, Fox Lorber, we didn't really start releasing films directly. We were acting as agents in most of the 80s. And in the 90s, we started directly distributing films on video. One of the first films I distributed was Tampopo, in fact, a great film by Tommy. And I can go on. The list of films that I had were just the choicest of the choice art house pantheon, many of which sadly are now in the Criterion collection, but sometimes they come back to us. But one of the fondest memories I had that just gives you some idea of how the video market has changed, I was able to acquire the early films of John Woo, including The Killer, and after that, Hard Boiled. I think at the time, people didn't really know Woo that well, but The Killer was a big success for us, and we wound up, I think we paid $60,000 to acquire the rights to The Killer, and we paid $350,000 to acquire the rights to Hard Boiled, which actually produced bigger returns for us. But I came into my office one day, and my team was assembled, and they said, "Richard, we have terrible news. We were just downstairs in front of our building on Park Avenue South and 28th Street. And there's this guy with a folding table who has a package of VHS copies of Hard Boiled
Like bootlegs?
on the table, and he's selling them bootleg for just a few bucks a piece. What are we going to do?" And I glowered at them, and I broke into a huge smile, and I said, "This is the best news we've ever had. We finally have a film
You've made
that's
it.
hot enough to be worth bootlegging."
Yeah.
And the pirates, are not going to barely dent the market for us. And of course, that went on to be our bestseller ever.
That's amazing. So, I mean, I love hearing about the early days of home entertainment. It seems like you guys have seen every iteration of physical media. I'd love to kind of get a sense of, as physical media went from mass market to a collector's market and streaming took over, how have you guys been able to sort of guide your ship through those changing tides?
Well, I'll jump in here and say that, we have always believed that the physical media business is going to endure. It's changing, and it will continue to change, but we think that there's a committed audience that wants to both watch and have. And the having part of the equation is because it's a personal statement of meaning. Somebody owns something, and it's it's an attribute. It's an identity. And of course they want to watch it and they want to watch it again and give it. But I think the relationship between the having and watching side of the video collectible is a perfect complement to the streaming business, where in many cases people want to stream something and then buy the physical media. The streaming in some ways becomes an introduction or becomes a sampling and stimulates the interest. And then of course, when you see the physical media version, you realize that there's no streaming service that allows you to see the quality and the depth and the additional materials that you can finally see on a well-turned UHD 4K disc.
And they should know that streaming is not forever. And, you can stream it for a month, 2 months, and then it goes away. So having it is the next natural step. Sorry, Frank, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say that in early 2000s, people were telling me that, this is the big end of physical media. And I was like, no, there's no way this is it. I said, I understand that the studios are not going to do the kind of numbers that you were used to, mainly because the whole rental market which was a multi-billion-dollar market. That's what was going to get affected. That's what was going to eventually kind of be replaced by streaming. During the beginning of Netflix, when they actually carried discs, it was great because they would purchase almost every movie that we released, and that became a platform for people to actually rent a movie, watch it, and now I love this film, now I'm going to go buy it. Or no, this is good enough, I watched it, I don't need to own it. So it was like a really good place but now it's a little harder for people to see the new transfers that we do, or when we pick up a movie for the first time that's never been out on home video, or the last time it came out on video was on VHS, or not even, like, when we released certain titles that I've picked up through Universal, like Midnight Man, I don't think I even got. It may have been released on VHS, but there were so many movies that I acquired that I remember when I was asking Universal for these titles, they were like, "Are you sure these are with us?" And I'm like, "Yeah, these films are yours. It just hasn't been." And some of those films actually had been already remastered in HD, so they had done it for other markets and for television. But the Black Windmill, another one that came out on VHS but never came out on DVD, never came out on Blu-ray. And of course, some of the titles that I acquired through Paramount and had never even been out on. It's kind of insane when a film makes its home video debut on Blu-ray. Like it had never been out on any format before. And of course, the people that are DVD fans and VHS, especially in those days, it was mostly, they always kind of balk at that and say, why aren't you releasing this on DVD? And we have to explain to them that the DVD market is very unpredictable. Some titles sell 10 times the amount that it does on Blu-ray, and some titles don't even sell at all. So the titles that had been out on DVD previously were the ones that are continuing to sell. So it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more unpredictable. So that's why we try to stay, when we acquire the rights, we try to pick up, Blu-ray right now. So,
well, we were, among the first companies to work with the video rental side of Netflix. And I did some of my earliest home video deals in partnership with Red Envelope, which was the brand that Netflix used for physical media. We actually joint ventured with them on acquiring some titles in the, early 2000s and 2010, 11 or so before they shut it off. But at the peak, I am a little rusty on the exact statistics, but approximately 100,000 titles were available through the Netflix video rental system. Today, among all the streaming platforms, there are probably fewer than 10,000 titles currently available. So just to give you a sense of the variation between what was available in physical media and what is currently available in streaming is another reason why people are still embracing physical media, just because of the range and the depth and the variety that's available. They're just films that you can't find anymore on any streaming platform. Now, we have our own streaming platform, Kino Film Collection, which we're very proud of, and we're growing fast. We probably have under 1,000 titles currently, but we'll be adding more. The fact is that we can take risks on putting certain things on our streaming platform even before we decide to put them out in physical media. There are costs involved in releasing a film, Frank knows well, even on DVD. And in some cases, it used to be that the film's performance on physical media would be a determinant of whether we wanted to, or we could get it on a streaming service. Now we can launch a film and try it on our streaming platform, and then decide to put it out in a higher quality in 4K or Blu-ray on our disc business.
Yeah, and then some of the classics, like even like right behind us, there's some film noir stuff, and some of the actor collections that I've released. Some of those films had never been out on DVD or some of them had never been out on VHS. Some had been, but the only way you're going to see these movies right now are on physical media. Those films are not streaming anywhere.
Right.
I mean, majority of the films that we have, I think, done 26 volumes of the film noir collection. I would say 2/3 of those films are not available anywhere besides on disc. And some of the bigger ones, yeah, they have been available before on Amazon or HBO Max or something, but they're very, very limited time. They're there for a few months and then they're gone. So if the collector, I used to be a much bigger collector. My older brother, God bless his soul, he was also a big time collector, a much bigger collector than I was. And for him, it was comfort knowing that he owned that movie. It's a movie I love, and now I have it. So it's on my shelf. So it was almost like, yeah, this
Emotional
is it. Now I
support.
have this, and yeah, the emotional. It was kind of like that. And for me, it's at one point I realized that if when I used to be a much bigger collector. I used to have them because in New York we were always dealing with space. The problem is that if I lived in the suburbs and I had a huge basement where I could carry my whole collection, I would have done it. But I had to get rid of records and all those other things that I had. But collecting is I love the fact that so many of the filmmakers have come out now in support of physical media. Even in last year when I went to the Saturns, we won an award, and then I got on stage, the biggest cheer was when I said long live physical media, and so many people cheered because they thought that's what people want. Because I think Guillermo del Toro, of course, and Christopher Nolan, other big filmmakers have come out and said that if you really want to own a film, you have to buy it. You have to have a copy of it on your shelf, because on your cloud and stuff like that, it could disappear. There's all these different things, and then you get all the extras. You get the best transfer. You get that's the main reason physical media is, is still
It's more important than ever.
Yeah, it is, and it's getting tougher and tougher every day because the younger generation, thank God, are slowly kind of getting into.
Yeah.
I feel like the millennials were not as much into collecting, where I think the Gen Zs are, which is kind of a surprise.
Well, I think that's consistent with the revival of vinyl.
Yeah.
In many ways, and also even flip phones. I mean, there's some kind of an intrigue with the retro
Nostalgia,
gadgets
yeah.
and the retro technologies, and I don't know if that's sustainable, but we'll
We'll
take
take it.
whatever success we can get. So.
Well, before we get to audience questions, Richard, I would love to know a little bit about your collection, your personal physical media collection. And I know that you're also an art enthusiast and artist. Do you liken collecting films to collecting art? Tell us a little bit about your collection.
Well, let me just say candidly that my collection is principally the films that I've been releasing throughout the years. And one of the first films that I was proudest to collect was one of the first deals that I did for a documentary back in the mid-'80s. It was a documentary called The Complete Beatles, which was the definitive look at the career and the history of the Beatles, made by a very talented filmmaker named Patrick Montgomery with a company called Delilah Films. And they asked me to go out and find the money, and I pre-sold the rights to the films to a company that was then called CBS MGM, one of the various partnerships. But in getting the deal done, I talked to the leaders of all of the, there was actually CBS Fox, but MCA was also in the game to negotiate an offer. I was able to get the film released, and the video advance covered most of the budget. And that remained one of the proudest titles that I had in my collection. Unfortunately, the underlying rights expired, and the film could never be reissued legally on DVD or Blu-ray, which is a shame. Another film that I was involved in causing to be made was another proud collectible, which was called Elvis 56, a documentary about a pivotal year in the life and career of Elvis Presley, made with Alman and Susan Raymond. And another title where I was able to pre-sell the rights, and that became a prized feature in my collection. But beyond that, through the years of Fox Lorber and Koch Lorber, I amassed a library of some of the best classics. Some of them are on the shelves here. In my own home, I'm not much of a collector beyond the films that I've helped birth, so to speak. But I do have a massive art collection, which I'm maybe embarrassed to say is mostly by my own hand. I've been a working artist now for about 60 years, and I've been painting and drawing and doing a variety of creative endeavors that, continue to expand my own thinking about media and culture and life in general. Every time I confront a blank page or canvas or a large sheet of quality paper, in some ways it's a battlefield. It's just a tension of dynamics and choices and deliberations in terms of shapes and colors. I'm, as you can guess, an abstract artist. And it's guided me in certain of the strategic decisions that I make in my life, personal life and business life. It's also a zone of contemplation that allows me to go deeper into myself and turn off the rest of the world in my own zone.
And I think we're going to maybe even see some of your art and hear some of your thoughts in a new platform. Am I correct?
Well, I'm now announcing publicly that you'll be reading Richard Lorber's Substack heretofore.
Very exciting.
I think the first edition of this Substack will appear soon, and there may be one or two of my images there, which have nothing to do with what I'm writing about, but it'll give you some picture of consciousness that infuses my thinking.
So you heard it here first, everybody. Look out for that. Before we get to audience questions, Frank, do you want to make any Kino Lorber Studio Classics announcements?
No, because we're waiting to sign a few deals. So no, right this part we still don't have anything else to announce. But this past weekend we announced day before Peter Sellers' centennial, we announced the Pink Panther collection, which we're going to be releasing the first 5 films on 4K and of course on Blu-ray. So we're really looking forward to that. Pink Panther, Shot in the Dark, Return of the Pink Panther, Revenge of the Pink Panther, and Pink Panther Strikes Again. As far as art's concerned, I was a pretty good cartoonist when I was younger. My dad was a very talented artist. Could have been a chef, could have been a great artist, but Chris decided to go into banking instead.
We'd love to see some caricatures of the executive team here.
But I was pretty good artist at one time, right? So
both of you multi-hyphenates.
No, I've seen some of Richard's art. He's more talented than I am, but overall, I would say my whole thing was I was a big comic book fan, and I loved doing cartooning and stuff like that. And some of the stuff I did actually was pretty good. But when you're in a classroom with really talented kids, and you see how quickly they draw something, and you're like, no, if I can't be one of the best at it, I don't want to be in it. So I pretty much quickly decided not to do that no more. So,
well, you're very good at what you do now. So let's get into audience questions. Rick is asking, is there any possibility of potential reprints of past Scorpion releasing titles?
It all depends if they become available to us. We're about to put out Death Ship and and Terror Train. Both of those are being restored right now in Canada. Those are two films that I think Walt had put out on DVD and then eventually on Blu-ray. So those were releasing. In some cases, some of the films that he had released through us, some of the studio titles, we have re-released. But majority of the stuff that he, it's a whole different world where companies like Code Red and Scorpion, and at one point other companies like Vinegar Syndrome and all of them. Now Vinegar Syndrome, of course, does much bigger things, but they were dealing a lot with independent producers, and they had their finger on the pulse of that whole world, which I've, once in a while I've done Rawhide Rex, and here and there we've done some films once in a while, but majority of those type of films are usually licensed by companies like Synapse and Severin and Vinegar Syndrome and stuff like that. So if anybody's going to put those out, it's probably going to be people like them more than us. So.
Well, this question touches on what you were both discussing a little while ago. Greg is asking, can you explain the recent rise of VHS collecting? I can understand the resurgence of vinyl, but a VHS, it's confounding him.
I think there's a kind of an exoticism about the arcane and the retro, and the idea of a tape as a physical medium that you can actually see and understand, how the information is going across the bands of the wheels of the tape machine. I think it's partly nostalgia and fascination for something that is so old to most people now that it seems new. Beyond that, I'm not convinced of any claims that people are making for the superior quality of VHS. There were arguably legitimate comments about the superior quality of vinyl compared to a CD,
right?
In terms of but I don't think that carries over in terms.
Well, the thing with vinyl was that it was I understand that completely. That especially if you have the high definition equipment, that's why the vintage 1950s and 60s equipment was very popular. They're very highly regarded, and there's a big demand for them, and they sell. Even though the equipment from the 80s and 90s are much stronger, probably better overall quality, people love listening to those records and real tapes and all that stuff on those old machines, the machines from the 60s and the 70s. I think it's mostly nostalgia. That's what it is. I think VHS tapes, some labels have actually, especially with horror films, they re-released films on VHS. I know that when we did Parasite, for some reason, I think Bannon still had the videotape rights.
Yeah.
He didn't have home video, but he had videotape. So he asked if it was okay for him to put it out. I was like, yeah, sure, go with it.
Charlie Band is one of my old friends from the early days of home video. He has a company called Wizard Video. He still has it, and he still puts out VHS versions of Puppet Master and all of his old films.
Yeah, and
I think one thing, I think there's a sort of a fascination with seeing the original format in which it was first made available, apart from the theaters. Similar to people loving to see 35 millimeter prints projected, even if they're scratchy and
right. And the thing,
blurry.
The VHS as itself was, we at that time we were like, wow, this is incredible. But when you look at it now, you have to rewind the tape.
Please be kind to rewind.
And you had to go to fast forward. You see lines through everything. All that stuff was perfected with DVD and Blu-ray. So. Picture quality wise, sound wise, no, there's no way VHS is the equal of the later formats. But I say it's a nostalgic thing. It's people love, saying they want it.
But if anyone wants to buy one of our discs and convert it to VHS for their own home use, I don't think there's any restriction on
No, it's going to be pretty good quality also, because the DVD.
Knock yourselves out.
Using the DVD as the source master, I think that VHS tape is going to look very good. I know that some older VHS tapes they cost a lot of money now, like the original printings of films, like the first time Friday the 13th or something like that. I've seen some VHS tapes sell for $20,000, which is incredible. So.
Wow.
So take care of your shrink wrap.
Yes. Joe Baeza is asking, with Halloween season fast approaching, I'd love to hear what some of Frank's favorite classic horror movies are. I'd love to hear Richard's too. Being from the New York area, did Frank grow up enjoying any of the late night horror hosts like Zachary or The Creep?
I was never really that much into horror. I loved certain ones, the more highbrow ones, the great. Of course, The Shining, I've always said, is my favorite horror film of all time, and I love the John Carpenter. For me, the Friday the 13th films were like, schlock. I never thought of them as good films, but the original Halloween, of course, Texas Chainsaw Massacre and stuff like that. Some of those really all-time classics. Those I really respected and loved. But it came to. When it came to horror films, I always paid more attention to them when it was Wes Craven or John Carpenter or the major directors attached to them. The lesser ones, once in a while you get surprised. Like I remember when I went to see Return of the Living Dead, I was surprised how great that little film was, because it was a kind of a parody of the George Romero films. And so I really enjoyed that one. But most of the time, I was, if I had to pick my top 5 horror films just from the top of my head, I would say, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, of course, The Shining. I also love some of the really classics like The Haunting, Robert Weiss's Haunting, or The Innocents is a beautiful film, with Jack Clayton film. But so those would be it.
Well, I was a huge fan of Zachary. I grew up with Zachary, and I looked forward to the nights that his show was on, and I would stay up. I think it was maybe Saturday nights and 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. I'm not sure exactly, but he kind of infused me with a love of classic horror, watching black and white versions of the Frankenstein films, Dracula, and it led me to explore early silent horror. And to this day, one of my favorite films of all time is The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which I'm very proud that we have a superb edition of it here, as we do with Nosferatu. But before I was even thinking about being in the film and video business, I was teaching art history, and I used to show Cabinet of Dr. Caligari in my art history courses to just help my students understand the origins of German Expressionism, both as a painting, as a format of painting, and as a style in painting that led to other developments of Expressionism, and also early cinema. So that's really still my touchstone for horror.
And it's inspired so many filmmakers. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't remember those shows at all. I remember seeing, there was something on PBS on Saturday nights that it had a host. I forgot what the show.
Elvira?
No, it wasn't Elvira, but it was something like that where they showed horror films and they introduced the show film. It was very so
Alicia looks a little bit like Elvira.
I was Elvira for Halloween last year.
Well, your eye makeup says it all.
Well, there you go. I love Elvira. I love her.
Yeah, no, yeah, but yeah, I did watch. There was a show that she had that I did watch for a while, and Joe Bob Briggs? I think that was another one that I used to
Joe
watch.
Bob Briggs, yeah.
Yeah, so no, I did watch some of those things, but I mean, I was never my favorite genre was always action films and cop films and thrillers and adventure films and stuff like that. Horror film, I was never really that big of a horror fan. But again, like I said, American Werewolf in London, something like that, something major like that, I watched, I loved. But and of course, the classic Universal horror and
The Mummy was one of my favorites.
Yeah.
The Invisible Man.
The original Invisible Man with Claude Rains, that's a masterpiece. So the James Whale films, Bride of Frankenstein and Old Dark House, those are great films.
But of course, I was growing up, it was before even color television was widely available. So seeing black and white was very much my roots in watching television and eventually watching films.
Well, I could tell you that I dumpster dove and found a beautiful color TV, like one of those ones that was like a piece of furniture. It was like, I brought that home. We went and bought these tubes. It replaced the 6 tubes that were like $1 each, and it was in perfect condition. And guess what? My father's like, I'm taking it. So now we're like, so the next one I found that I fixed for myself was a black and white one, and I used to watch. I used to watch like Twilight Zone late at night in my room, and the Avengers and all that stuff. But eventually, when I was watching the Avengers, even the color episodes were in black and white. So for the longest time, I thought Avengers was always black and white, but it wasn't. So.
This next question is from Hank. He's asking, one of my favorite things is the use of original poster art on your covers. So I'm curious about that side of the business. Do the studios supply you with the graphics? Is that part of the licensing deal or a separate department that you deal with? Or do you have to find the artwork on your own?
In some cases, the studios have them. In some cases, the one they have, I could find a better version of it, like a sharper version of it. But in a lot of cases, the studios still have the original art, which is great, sometimes textless, which makes everything a lot easier. And in some cases, they don't have it, so we have to explain to them that this is their original poster, and they're always worried about the artist and something, But in most cases, these films are all they're all public domain. They're all protected because they're already paid for by the original studio. So yeah, I love using original poster art. I would say 95% of the time that's what we do. There's always that 1 or 2 films where it has like a really bad poster that you cannot use, and you end up using something different. But yeah, so I've always been proud of using original poster art whenever I had the opportunity. And in some cases, we actually use international poster art, because the American poster for the release was not that great, but the international one was beautiful.
Well, it may be that we should start reissuing our video discs in laserdisc size boxes so we have a better presentation of the poster art, which is one of the driving values of people buying vinyl.
Yeah,
it doesn't want that bigger image.
Yeah, they look.
It's true. It looks good.
Some of those posters were so beautiful. They were such works of art that I think, they would look great on laserdisc. But in some cases, we do commission new art. The art for Longest Yard, the classic Robert Aldrich, Burt Reynolds film, the original poster is horrible. It's like and I never liked the Photoshop covers that Paramount had done, so we commissioned new art for that and got Paramount to approve it and released it, and it looks amazing. So
if you come across a bad poster, I mean, with your artistic abilities combined, I feel like you can just create your own next time. Just food for thought.
Yeah,
Just
I mean,
saying.
we've done sometimes. In some cases, we've actually taken 2 posters and combine them together to create a cover. So we've done.
We'll have Frank do a cartoon on one side, and I'll do an abstract cubist composition on the other side, and we'll let people.
That's
have
what
both.
I'm talking about.
The next monster movie that we release, we'll do that for.
Kenneth is asking, Richard, what alcoholic beverage would you see yourself pairing with a marathon of Missing in Action? And what beverage would you consume while revisiting Mephisto?
Wow, that's I think I need a drink just to even contemplate an answer for that. But I think for Missing in Action, I would probably have a beer. And for Mephisto, I'd probably want just a flight of shots of tequila.
Classic.
Straight to hell. Straight to hell. With
Just
I would love to see
straight to the
Richard sit
head.
down and watch the Missing in Action trilogy. that would be. Yeah, that's what we should do. We should get together and drink, get some.
My preferred drink though is a good good gin martini. So I'll find other matchings and pairings with the next film that's brought up.
I used to be vodka. Now it's tequila and whiskey for me. So.
Okay. I also I'm a bourbon drinker occasionally, although I have to say I'm drinking less, but I'm being more selective.
Yeah.
Ah, I like that. Is your martini preference with a twist, dirty?
Uh, I like it. I like the straight gin with a little bit, a thimble of vermouth on the side that I add to it as I'm sipping, and typically a twist.
Okay.
And I like it straight up, but I have the shaker ice on the side, and I add ice cubes as it dries, as it warms.
I wish we were all in the studio having a drink right now.
Yeah, I described it as a deconstructed martini to most waiters and bartenders.
Oh yeah, I like that. You can kind of customize it yourself. Let's see. Brian Sherman asks, I'm curious how you approach a box set like the airport movies. How many moving parts are spinning at once?
Too many. It's first of all, you're remastering 4 films, long films, complicated too because the first film was originally 65 millimeter. It was released as a 70 millimeter theatrical presentation and all that kind of stuff. So those elements are available to us, but to restore something from using those film elements, it's just impossible because of the cost. But then it's of course, the actual standalone releases are easy because they all 4 films had really nice original poster art, so we used those. And then we decided to do a box set, which made it really complicated, and then created a booklet for it and everything else. So that type of a release is very, very complicated. And November we have like 5 or 6 box sets coming out, which has been a nightmare to deal with, but it's all coming through now. So hopefully people will enjoy the look of all those sets that we're about to announce. So.
I think we have time for a couple more questions. Just going through, we had a lot, so just going through them. Let's see. Frank, a big thank you for all of your expertise and hard work. In your heart of hearts, what's been the one big film you'd like to distribute, but for whatever reason can't? And what's with this Dolby Vision 2? This is from Dennis Shippey, sorry.
What was the second part of the question?
What's with this Dolby Vision 2?
Dolby Vision. Well, I guess he's not a fan of Dolby Vision. That's what he's saying.
It seems like he's saying there's a point, like a version 2.0.
Oh, I haven't heard of that. So I guess that's something new that's coming up. I've never been a big Dolby Vision fan myself, but like I said, HDR10 and SDR are fine. And the first part of the question was
In your heart of
film
hearts.
that yeah, I mean, I've mentioned a few of those type of films before, but one of the films that I really wanted to put out was this film called The Victors. It's a film directed written and directed and produced by Carl Foreman, who was legendary blacklisted screenwriter, producer, and stuff like High Noon and Guns of Navarone, and has an incredible all-star cast. It's an epic. I had talked to Sony about it in the past, because they have never put it out themselves. So if I had to pick one film, I would say that. But there's so many other movies that I would have loved to release and done a special edition of that either we didn't get an opportunity or is with some studio that we've never done a deal with. So, but if I had to just pick one title, I would say The Victors. So.
Let's do one more. Mark Edward Hoik, I can't pronounce, I'm sorry, I don't want to butcher his last name. He has a question for each of you, so we'll end on this. For Richard, in all the years and incarnations of your home video career, Fox Lorber, Koch Lorber, Kino Lorber, what films have you worked the hardest to acquire and succeeded in retaining as you moved from label to label?
That's a very good question, and I guess thinking back on some of the films that I first acquired and then lost the rights to and then acquired again, one of them was Lena Wertmüller's Swept Away that I had in an early iteration. There have been some early Godard films that I had and lost and regained, like La Chinoise. there were some documentaries that I pursued, but I never was able to actually secure the rights to until I did an overall deal with Milestone Films and was able to bring to market the Mystery of Picasso, which is an amazing art film. I'll just leave it at that. And as we're talking, I may think of a couple of others, but let's start with that.
Okay. And then his question for Frank is, now that you've freed Night of the Juggler from limbo, while I have heard horror stories about the intransigence of its overseas rights holder, have you contemplated acquiring the long unavailable 1974 action thriller Open Season with John Philip Law and William Holden?
That's one of those films that, like I said, if it became available to us, we would love to release it. But it's not something that we're going out to pursue, especially because of what you just said, because of the rights holder. And there's so many people that own certain types of films that they think they're worth a lot more than they actually are worth. And until those asking prices come down, they don't make any sense because films like Open Season, it's a good film, and of course it's probably even a smaller film than Night of the Juggler. The hardcore physical media fans know about it, but outside of that, not too many other people know about the film. It's a really good movie, and it deserves to be released on home video, and I would love to do it, but don't hold your breath.
Got it. Well, Richard, unless you wanted to add to the previous question, I think this might be a good time to wrap. But
I just want to say that it's, when I look back on my whole career in business, I measure it in generations of video rights. We would typically acquire rights to a video for a term of 7 years. And in the 35 years that I've been actively involved in this business, I'm proud that I've fathered 5 generations of video releases over those 7-year terms times 5. And I think that the future is still very available to us. I wouldn't say it's bright, but it's buzzing with excitement in terms of what's coming up from us anyhow in physical media, thanks to Frank and our great team.
Yeah, and the thing that, Richard, you mentioned before about a lot of the films that you introduced to the American market that we did at Kino, like the Wong Kar-wai films and the Michael Haneke films, and they all when the rights became available again, and they ended up going to Criterion. So that's where we lost a lot of those films to, And I mean, even I remember early on when we lost 10 Drum. And Don was so angry about that. But I told him, just let it go.
Well, one of the first films that I did with Don was a film that somehow I got the rights from the owner, was Putney Swope.
Mm-hmm.
And I had all rights from the man who had financed the film, called Arthur Dubow, as I recall. And I didn't quite know what to do with it. But I did a deal with Don to handle the educational rights. And I think at one point, it was one of the first films that I put out on home video. And that's still a film that I'm very proud of. I have no idea who has it. It's probably in the Criterion library.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's Robert Downey Sr., right?
Yeah.
It's directed by him.
But, these films keep cycling back. And, there are films that we may have released initially 15, even 20 years ago that may yet come back to us. And we're still eyeing for those films and very proud to be able to have them restored and bring them out now in 4K UHD. So any of those collectors out there watching this who have their favorites, let me know, and we'll track them down and bring them to you if you buy them.
Yeah, when fans say
first?
When fans tell us that, you guys are doing what Criterion is doing, I'm like, no, they've been doing a lot of the stuff that we had done in the past.
Exactly.
The Kieslowski collection, the Michael Haneke collection, the Wong Kar-wai collection, all of those were originally with us. So we were the ones that brought it to the American market first, and of course you did Umbrellas of Cherbourg and some of the major titles that you've done at The Killer and
maybe one day they'll come back to us. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Richard, for being our guest today. Thank you, Frank,
Pleasure.
as always. And thanks to everyone who submitted questions. You can find the titles that we discussed today, along with thousands of others, at kinolorber.com. The link is in the description below. While you're there, sign up for our newsletter if you haven't already, and be sure to follow us on social. Thank you so much, everyone. We will see you next time.